1. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum. And after last week's heated debate about Jarvis Landry and other players such as that, we're actually going to get into a little bit of a different topic this week. We're going to be talking about some underrated players that may actually already be on the roster, and maybe we could see them in 2018. After that, we'll go into some different discussions about how contracts are starting to get out of control in the NFL. I think that might be a little bit interesting, especially considering the monster contract that one Jimmy Garoppolo just signed. That's seriously a crazy contract, folks. And then at 8:30, we'll be joined by Kendall Calhoun, who is going to talk to us about how he's preparing for the draft, and as well as some general football talk. I think that would be some really good stuff, because it's always nice to talk with some folks on the offensive line. So let's go ahead and get started. We're running a little bit behind, but that's because I just got back from the Dolphins Cancer Challenge. Actually, let me go ahead and talk about that really quick. So in case any of you weren't aware, the Dolphins Cancer Challenge will be starting by tomorrow, and just tonight was the kickoff party as everybody starts to prepare. It's raised over $22.5 million already in the 7 years. This is its 8th year. So in 7 years, it's raised over $22.5 million for cancer research in the Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center here in Miami. And just to put this in perspective, the DCC is the largest cancer fundraising event in all of sports. Not just the NFL, in all of sports. That means nothing in baseball, nothing in basketball, nothing in hockey or any of those other sports comes even close to what the Dolphins Cancer Challenge can manage to do. So big credit to the Miami Dolphins for being able to put together such a fantastic event. Michael Mandich, he's on the board of directors. He's done an incredible job carrying on the legacy of his father, Jim Mad Dog Mandich, who, of course, lost his fight with cancer several years ago. It's truly amazing to see the community come together like this, and how much the former players, current players, all sorts of cancer survivors, they all come together in one central location for one central cause. It's truly incredible, and I hope to see it grow for many years to come. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and get back to some football talk. So I don't know how many of you were keeping an eye on my timeline today, but I went into some film on one Cameron Malveaux, and he's an undrafted free agent, but he's sticking around, and he actually did some pretty impressive stuff when he got the chance to play. He did his actual defensive debut in Denver, and that's the film that I got the stuff from. And needless to say, while he wasn't perfect by any means, there was certainly a lot there that would say that he's worth looking at and worth keeping around for a few years to come, at least. Like, for instance, we're going to be moving on from Terrence Fede, most likely. And, of course, Terrence Fede is one of our primary backups at defensive end. He's also something of a special teams ace. But we obviously cannot keep every single player, and I don't think Terrence Fede has shown enough to say that he's going to be a superstar in the league anytime soon. So it's nice to be able to have a guy like Cameron Malveaux, who actually has a lot of potential and showed that he can do a lot. He has excellent burst off the line most of the time. He has some strength. I didn't see a whole lot of great moves. He was mostly just pushing guys out of his way, and that burst is usually enough to get him there. But that was just against the Denver Broncos. I haven't gotten a chance to look at him in the other 3 games that he played defense yet, so maybe there's something more there. Maybe there's not as much as I think there is. But just from that game alone, I'm willing to see that there's a lot in Cameron Malveaux that we might be missing, because for one reason or another, he hasn't been able to play that much. Maybe because there was another veteran in his way, or because there was somebody with a higher reputation in his way. And I'm not trying to say that Charles Harris and William Hayes didn't deserve the spot, or Andre Branch should have been benched right away, because obviously Andre Branch, while a lot of people are down on him because of how much money he's making, he actually wasn't terrible. And not only that, this is the thing about football that a lot of people seem to misunderstand, is that just because you have a good player sitting on the bench does not mean that the other guy in front of him isn't worth the shot too. Like, for instance, when I talk about how Jarvis Landry would obviously be the best choice, that's because it's true. Jarvis Landry is the best choice. He's the most talented player that is in the wide receiving core. Now, do I think that he's so essential to the team that the Dolphins can't survive without him? No, because there's still other talent available. This is the same situation that I feel at defensive end. People think that defensive end is going to be a need this year because Cameron Wake's going to be retiring soon. I get that. That's important. Charles Harris hasn't become the next Cameron Wake yet. Okay, give it time. That's fine. Andre Branch will probably be moving on at some point. Yeah, I understand. That's fine. So we don't have an emergency yet. If I'm Miami, I'm re-signing William Hayes because of what he showed, and he still wants to be in Miami. So I'm definitely going to bring him back to be a run stopper. And we have guys like Cameron Malveaux. And this other thing that I wanted to discuss was that just you also you see that you have Cameron Malveaux. And recently, something that's been getting a lot of traffic, at least on Twitter, that I posted out was a film review that we did on PhinManiacs last year by Matthew Knowles, and it was of Isaiah Ford. Now, Isaiah Ford is a talented wide receiver that Miami picked up late in the draft, and he didn't really get to do much because he wound up on IR before the season began, but a lot of people were very high on him and felt that the Dolphins got excellent value on him. So this is part of the whole reason why I'm wondering why everybody is panicking if Jarvis leaves. If we have all this talent at wide receiver, we have all this talent at defensive end that's just hiding there waiting to be looked at and developed, then I don't see the need to stress signing every single player that potentially may leave, especially if it's for a lot of money. Now, this is the thing that I want to talk about with you, Chad, is that there are so many underrated players on the roster even now that I think it's worth giving them a look. And this is the thing. And I also look at it this way. Jay Ajayi was in the way of Kenyon Drake. So was Damian Williams, but for a different reason. If Jay Ajayi had never left, if Damian Williams had never gotten hurt, we would have never known that Kenyon Drake could do what he did. Now, obviously, some people did. This is another shout out to Brandon Howard. He's been saying that Kenyon Drake is a better player overall for the offense anyway. But we would have never gotten to see him if it weren't for Ajayi leaving. So this just makes me think, how often do we wind up losing a player who can make an incredible impact on a team simply because we didn't give him a chance because there was somebody in his way? And that makes me wonder, how many players do you think are just hiding on the roster that we just don't know about?
Well, I mean, excuse me, listen, to me, that comes down to what are your coaches doing in practice and how are they evaluating your talent? And it depends on what role you're looking at those players filling. So, that's something that's always crossed my mind with the Ajayi part is Ajayi had to leave to get a better look at Kenyon Drake, and so I don't quite, and maybe that's why Ajayi's gone, because he was throwing such a fit about the number of carries he was getting. But to me, I'm like, Adam Gase is the coach. He's making the plays. He's calling who's the personnel in there. What's the problem? If you want to cut Jay Ajayi's carries down, you cut him down. And so maybe he was just causing too much trouble about that. But as the coaches, the parts we never see are how well are the people picking up the game plans and how are they performing in practice, and how does that translate over to the game. And there's always players. I mean, this was always something that you heard about Matt Moore years ago, is there's always players that play better in games than they play in practice. And so I think along that line of thinking, what you're saying has some merit in that, if you have players that are buried in the depth chart, you're never going to actually see them match up in live competition in games that count. You're only seeing them in preseason games or in practices, and you don't really get a full feel for how that player is going to perform. And so, I think that's something, an attribute you're looking for in your coaching staff. It seems like the Patriots always know when to part ways, and they have somebody else that just steps up and fills the roles on the roster. And that's in this era of the salary cap, you need to be able to do that. You need, it's going to be hard to re-sign somebody like Terrence Fede, much like the Dolphins did when they had Derek Shelby. Nobody was really excited to have Derek Shelby go, but at that time they had drafted Terrence Fede, and he was almost the same exact size as Derek Shelby, and he was a late round draft pick, and he was much cheaper on the salary cap. And you're seeing that come around full circle again now with Terrence Fede. Now he'll be hitting the open free agent market, and he probably will get paid by somebody to be a quality reserve D end. And so for Miami, they'll once again be looking to replace him with depth on the roster, or it'll be somebody that would probably picked in the middle to late rounds of the draft.
Right, and so that's what I'm talking about, though, is that now you talking about the coaching staff and that they're having to evaluate. Well, this is also part of the bigger problem here, I feel like, is that we place too much emphasis on practice Because I understand practice, but it's a controlled environment and everybody is doing where they feel comfortable. But we all know that sometimes there are just players who seem to shine when the lights come on. Like, for instance, and I hate to bring this up because a lot of people are getting mad every time his name gets mentioned, but you have a guy like, say, a Tim Tebow, who is a terrible practice player and is arguably a terrible quarterback, but somehow when the game turned on, he somehow became good enough to win football games, enough to send the Broncos, help them to the playoffs. So when the lights come on, something happens to these players. And I feel like that there's been too much emphasis placed on practice, because obviously if you have a guy like, let's say, Ndamukong Suh, right? And you place him next to a guy like Vincent Taylor, obviously, one is going to shine brighter than the other because you have Ndamukong Suh and then you have Vincent Taylor. Vincent Taylor is a good player, as far as we know. We've only gotten to see him one season, but he's nowhere near Ndamukong Suh, and we will never know if he will ever get there to that point. It's certainly not until at least the season starts again. We don't know if he's ever going to become a superstar. He might, but if all we have to go on is what he does in practice instead of what's going on in the games, then it's kind of hard to tell, because you see so many players suddenly light it up when they're on the field, but then in practice they're horrible. And that's kind of a complaint that we had not so long ago when Joe Philbin was the head coach. He always looked at who practiced the best, and then we're going to put the best 46 active players on the field at any given moment. But that was according to practice, not according to how they played when they were on the field. And that kind of thing is what bugs me, because let's say, for instance, you have somebody like Cameron Malveaux versus Andre Branch. If Malveaux shows more than Branch, then it would seem logical to assume that Malveaux should be playing over Branch. And it's not like Gase hasn't shown willingness to do that before. Obviously, Byron Maxwell was brought into Miami during the Gase era, yes, it was during the Gase era, because they brought in Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell in the same year that Kiko came in, or Gase came in rather. So it's not like that Gase has not shown a willingness to bench players, even if they're high reputation guys. Byron Maxwell was a veteran corner. He was a high paid guy, but he got benched twice or three times possibly for guys who were arguably not as good as him, but still did a fairly decent job when they were spelling for Maxwell. So how do we know that we don't have guys like that who can do the same for, say, Andre Branch and Cameron Malveaux, and perhaps Isaiah Ford for Jarvis Landry? There are underrated players on this roster, I feel like, that nobody knows about simply because they haven't gotten a chance to prove themselves on camera. Like, if you have these guys on camera and they make a big play, then you see them. You want to see more of them. And then you start to wonder, why aren't they playing more? And that's when the whole practice question comes in, because practice is the one thing that we never see. We can't have cameras while the Dolphins are practicing. We can't see what Gase is game planning for everybody. We can only see the product on the field. And so we never know what we're missing until it finally shows up on that camera. So you have to wonder, and this is why I say that we can't get so hung up on certain guys that we get blinded by what we might already have, because we only get glimpses of those other guys. How do we know we don't have somebody who can easily take that spot if we never get to see them on camera? That's the problem that I'm having.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough call for every team, Lewis. I think some of the issues you face in that are the games are so close in the NFL. The teams are so balanced when teams play that one play can change the outcome of a game. If you blow an assignment. So some of it comes down to, I think, trust factors, that the coaches feel comfortable that the player knows what they're supposed to do and they'll get their assignment handled. And I think the other aspect that comes into it is there is the psychological aspect of money. When you look at somebody like Andre Branch, he's being paid all this money. I think the coaches and GMs feel some pressure. If Andre Branch is getting beat out, then it makes them look like they screwed up paying him, a big contract, because he can't even break the starting lineup. And so I do think, even though, coaches want to say we're going to start the best player, I do think how high you're drafted and how much you get paid psychologically impact who they play, because you suddenly create that pressure that how come you drafted that guy so high, or how come you're paying that guy so much and he's getting beat out? And so, it does impact it. But for me, I think teams need to do it more. And at least Adam Gase isn't afraid to pull a high-profile person. We've seen him bench Byron Maxwell. We've seen him pull Juwan James. And, he was a number one pick. And if you're not getting your assignments done, he doesn't waste much time. And I think other coaches sometimes are slower to get their guys pulled. But I personally like to see players get worked into the game. Like Isaiah Ford's a good example. I mean, I've noticed on Twitter, you've thrown out like, look, Miami has some potential talented wide receivers on their depth chart. We've seen what Jakeem Grant can do. Isaiah Ford on film from college looks like he has potential, as a prospect.
Yeah, he's not a tackle breaker, but he's a smooth, crisp route runner, and that's something that Miami actually doesn't have much of.
Right, but all you're going off of is on film from college because he got injured, and so what I don't like is you're really hoping that person works out. In the case of somebody like Jarvis Landry obviously is a Pro Bowl caliber, very good wide receiver, and so to replace him with a guy down on the depth chart who has very little repetition is extremely risky, in my opinion, because let's say you replace him with Jakeem Grant and he's not that big, so he gets hurt right away, so he's going to miss some games. Or let's say Isaiah Ford just is not able to get very good separation in the game, or he's starting to have some issues with drops. You don't want to find that out in the middle of your regular season when Jarvis Landry is gone. And so that's the reason why you would like to see those guys get worked in there more than the teams do. But it's all about circumstance. It's hard. Miami very seldom blows teams out. They just haven't been that good lately, and it's hard to put somebody like Isaiah Ford in if he is healthy. You have to dress him for one, and then you got to pull like a Kenny Stills or Devontae Parker or Jarvis Landry out of the game, which is really hard to do if you're in a must-win situation and the game's tight, to put in somebody that has very little reps. And so I think this has been thrown around several times, and the need is there. It's just one of the issues is football is such a dangerous sport in terms of injury, but there just is no such thing as a developmental league for the NFL. The World League's been tried, and it just didn't really gain traction. And the Canadian League, it serves as that at times, but that's the NFL desperately needs. I thought each team would like to carry 70 or 80 guys and have 20 or 30 guys that are in development that they can get a better look at. And I know that's the idea of the practice squad for a team to get a look at some of those guys, but it's a very valid point, Louis. How do you evaluate these guys when they're never able to get in there in critical situations to see, how mentally tough they are and how do they handle pressure? Because it just seems like in the NFL, when you look at the combine, there are so many athletes that go into the NFL that can run a 4.4, that can be impressive bench pressing, but they just don't do well in the game. They don't ever pan out for whatever reason. And a lot of that reason is how are they mentally tough? Are they able to understand how to operate the game plan and or understand the concept of the play that's trying to run and how to adjust mentally in the game? And are they handling the speed of the game? And you can play all the preseason games you want, but until it's real and it's on the line, it's just a different level of intensity. It's a different level of speed. What's being thrown at you, all the coordinators are trying to disguise coverages, and can you pick that up? And the only way you ever really know that is to get those guys in the game when it counts. And that's always the argument with older free agents and stuff. If you've got a guy that's a third or fourth round pick and you bring in a veteran, is that veteran really about the same player, but he's become a progress stopper because that young guy isn't getting any reps in the game? So all you can do right now in this day and age is just hope your coaches and your talent evaluators know what they're doing when they're watching these guys in practice and in the preseason, and they have a feel for when that guy's ready to get in there.
And this is part of why I feel like let's shift gears slightly just for a moment, because you brought up something that has been bugging me for a little while. you mentioned how Jakeem Grant, right? We all know how much of a weapon Jakeem Grant can be. We know how dangerous he is. We know how much we love when he gets the ball in his hands. The problem has been getting the ball in his hands. We haven't been able to find a spot for him. Now, you brought up how, well, what happens if Jakeem Grant he's small and he might get hurt. And this is the only thing that I had to say about this because it keeps getting brought up. He's going to get hurt. He's going to get hurt. He's going to get hurt. First of all, if we were so scared that he's going to get hurt, why did we draft him? Seriously, why did we draft him if we're so afraid that the moment he gets hit, he's going to go down and never get back up? And second of all, he's already been healthier than one of our other first-round draft picks in Devontae Parker. We're not running around wondering what's going to happen if Parker gets hurt. Why is that? Parker's a bigger guy, but he's been more hurt than Grant's ever been, and Grant's taken a few hits already.
Well, to answer your question, Liz, I think, Jakeem Grant primarily was drafted to be a returner. And so I think they desperately want him to be the returner, but just being honest is Jakeem Grant is a liability on punt return, and he has to earn a lot of trust to put him in there. And again, it comes down to situations and trust. And so let's say you're in a game that's critical and it's a tie game, or you're down by 3 and there's 3 minutes left in the fourth quarter and it's kind of windy out and they're punting. Do you really want Jakeem Grant fielding that punt, or do you want Jarvis Landry fielding that punt? And it comes down to who is the person you feel like is going to do the best job of that. And Jakeem Grant's dropped several punts. In terms of the injury part, I'm not saying that I'm worried that Jakeem Grant necessarily is an injury risk. I'm just saying he's small for the NFL size wise, and Jarvis Landry has missed almost no snaps. He's very, very reliable. And so I was just making the point, you have to be careful that I agree with you. Jakeem Grant with the ball in his hands is so quick and so fast. You want to be getting him the ball more in his hands. That's different, though, than saying I feel comfortable letting Jarvis Landry go, who's had all the receptions he's had and he's taken all the beating that Jarvis Landry has taken, and he still suits up every week. I'm questioning whether you could give Jakeem Grant the ball over the middle 10 times a game and he'll be able to hang in there and take the shots that Jarvis Landry has taken, or break the tackles that Jarvis Landry has breaking on a consistent basis for a whole season.
Okay,
and let's just say you're wrong, though. Listen, let's say Jakeem Grant isn't able to take that punishment. He gets hurt 3 or 4 games in when you're feeding the ball as much as Jarvis Landry gets it. Well, now Jarvis Landry's gone, Jakeem Grant's hurt, and so now you're suddenly fielding a team that's down to the next guy on the roster. Yeah, and so now he has very limited exposure, against top-level defensive backs in the NFL. And so if you just find out that defensive backs can shut him down pretty easily man-to-man, now your whole offense has to change, because with Jarvis Landry, most teams don't want to play man-to-man on him all game because he's dangerous. And so those are the type of decisions you have to make. And so I don't have a good answer for you in that. Is Isaiah Ford and Jakeem Grant able to replace Jarvis Landry? I have no idea, but I do know for sure Jarvis Landry has consistently been a Pro Bowl caliber player since he's suited up for the Dolphins. And you're letting one go on the hope that you'll have somebody that can step up and replace him. And when you're wrong, that's when you end up losing games, or you end up in that mediocre 8-8. So I personally like to keep Pro Bowl players in their primes playing as long as I can on my team, and replace positions where I know they're either that player is going to soon be retiring, or it's a position where you really need to upgrade the talent level. That's where I like to insert guys in more. But where you're at right now and the things you're saying, Lewis, you come back around and say, all right, what is the plan at the level when they're drafting people and acquiring people? Because why are you drafting Carew, and why are you drafting Ford, and why are you bringing these guys in if you don't have a spot to play them in the first place? They gave up quite a bit to get Leonte Carew when you think about it, the picks and where they drafted him at.
Oh, yeah, and that move has been criticized from here to next Tuesday.
It is, and so that's what I wonder. And maybe they just, at the time, they didn't plan on re-signing Kenny Stills, or maybe they thought that they weren't going to sign Jarvis Landry, and that's been the plan going forward. But you wonder, why were those moves made if there's not even a need to get that guy into the starting lineup? And so I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you, Lewis. I see the potential in those players the same as you do. And I don't have a good answer, though, when you have Kenny Stills, Jarvis Landry, and Devontae Parker. How do you pull those guys out and put those guys in? I don't know. That's a tough call on how and when to do that. And like I said, it seems like the good teams just seem to have a knack for it. Like the Steelers and Patriots are two of the more successful teams in the NFL, and you look at them and like, okay, so the Steelers have Mike Wallace, and when Mike Wallace was on the Steelers, he was so fast and so dangerous that he was burning people up, and eventually Mike Wallace wanted big money, and the Steelers said, nah, we'll let you go, and suddenly the Steelers have Antonio Brown, who's even better, and that's what it's about, is can you get those guys in there, develop them, and bring them in and replace them. And I hope you're right. If Jarvis Landry goes, I hope Isaiah Ford turns out to be a really good wide receiver. I hope Jakeem Grant scores 12 touchdowns because he's so good in open space. But you never really know until you make that move, and that's why general managers get fired all the time, because when you're wrong, you're suddenly having a losing season and you're suddenly out of the job. So it's a good question.
Well, we're currently waiting for Kendall Calhoun to call in and talk some draft preparations with us. So for the moment, we'll go ahead and keep discussing what we're discussing. Now, I understand what you're saying, Chad, but this is the thing, because you brought up how, well, when you remove players, this is how you wind up being an 8-8 mediocre team. What went through my mind when you said that was, and I didn't want to cut you off, so isn't Miami already, for the majority of Landry's tenure here, been an 8-8 caliber team? Isn't that what they've been for a long time now, up until 2016 when they went 10-6 under Gase's incredible run game based offense? It feels like Landry didn't.
They have.
So what if the worst that we can do is stay the same if Landry leaves, then I don't see the problem with panicking.
The point I'm trying to make, and that I was making last week too, is that Miami has been very, very poor at retaining the players they draft, the young players that you want to develop. And what Miami has typically done is to try to save money on the salary cap is they let their players go on their second contract and they play them for the rookie contract. That's what they did with Olivier Vernon. That's what they did with Lamar Miller. That's what they did with Sean Smith. They ended up letting Vontae Davis go because they thought he was too lazy. I think that was a Philbin one. And those players have all went on to have solid careers with other teams. And not that I'm saying that Lamar Miller's better than Kenyon Drake or that Andre Branch and Olivier Vernon aren't comparable players. The problem I have with it is Miami just typically lets these guys go and opens up a hole that they have to fill, and then they don't ever get an improved team. And so when I was mentioning last week, I'm looking at, okay, I like Kenyon Drake, but we have no other running back right now on the roster that I feel comfortable at all, that if we put in doesn't become a liability that makes our running game easy to stop. So that makes our offensive play calling becomes limited because we don't have a game-changing running back. And so here we are right now. We have Kenyon Drake. Lamar Miller's gone. Jay Ajayi's gone. Even David Williams technically is gone. He has to be re-signed if we want him. And so that's a hole. So we've got to desperately need to get another starting caliber running back in case Kenyon Drake gets hurt. We have Juwan James is gone. He was our first-round draft pick at right tackle. Is he a stud? No. But we're
going to have to answer that question later, Chad. Sorry to cut you off like that, but
we got to call him.
Yeah, we got a caller, and I believe it is our guest. I believe it is our guest for the night, Kendall Calhoun. Is that you?
Yes, sir.
All right, and glad to have you on with us, my friend. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right, so now obviously we met at the Dan Marino Foundation, and you and your buddies were a nice couple guys, and I'm glad to have met you. And first and foremost, what is it that you're doing to train for the upcoming draft? What is it that has changed from your everyday practice to now that you're getting ready to be drafted? What are you doing now?
More is just raising my level of focus, paying attention to certain details I may have overlooked while I was practicing with my college. So it's more just uppercase and T's, dotting the I's, things like that, just so I can show other teams that I can pay attention to detail.
And what kind of could you elaborate on that? Like what kind of things? You're an offensive lineman. Offensive linemen are all about technique. So what sort of things have you already noticed about yourself that maybe you didn't notice before?
Hand placement when I punch, my posture when I come out of my pass set, where my eyes need to be while I'm blocking a defender. And the big thing I've really been working on is noticing defense. I've been starting to learn coverages, not even just with the defense up front, but also looking at corners and safeties, outside linebackers, nickel packages, things like that, just so I can have that extra edge.
And you were at the University of Cincinnati, you guys had a lot to deal with, obviously, just like any other team. So what is it that you felt like was the toughest thing about playing at the level that you were, and how do you think you're preparing for the next level up?
Well, actually, for me, I originally started off when I came out of college. I went to Division II school. So going from there into the University of Cincinnati, the speed of the game was faster. The hardest adjustment to me was just the speed of it and all the variables and factors I needed to know before each and every play. Like I had a checklist I had to follow before every time the ball was snapped. And that was just kind of the biggest adjustment for me. And I feel like on the next level, that checklist will probably be twice as long. So just my ability to read and react be tested, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
So you feel you're already accustomed to the idea of the speed of the game speeding up on you?
Yes, I like, me personally, I just like being challenged, and it's really a game. I really love football and just enjoy having fun more than anything. So I just enjoy a good challenge and just want to see where that takes me.
So what was your biggest challenge, like when you faced off against anybody at the college level? Who was it that you were most challenged by?
I was challenged by quite a few guys. Rashawn Gary from the University of Michigan, Chase Winovich, University of Michigan, Justin Lawyer from SMU, Sharif Finch from Temple, just guys like that. Really explosive, potent pass rushers.
Is there anybody you'd be looking forward to going up against in the NFL? Anybody in particular?
I actually want to go with Von Miller. A lot of people say it's really hard to block him, and I feel like if you block him, you can block anybody.
Well, Von Miller is considered one of the premier pass rushers, so that would be a very big challenge.
It will be a very big challenge.
So now I'm sorry to say that you didn't get an invite to the combine, but a lot of people seem to put a lot of emphasis on the whole 40-yard dash thing. Do you feel like that's a bit overrated, especially for you offensive linemen?
I feel like it is overrated because so many people focus solely on the 40-yard dash that becomes their main priority over even the field work to an extent. As offensive linemen, it's good to have a good 40 because, it shows athleticism. And most teams, they look at your 10-yard split as offensive linemen more than anything, just so the explosiveness coming off the ball, they can simulate you being in your stance. So, but yeah, it's kind of, one of those things that it's really hyped up and a lot of people take focus and draw towards. But,
All right, so let's dig a little bit into the psyche of one Kendall Calhoun. How did you first get started with football, and how did you grow to love it to where you are now?
I first started playing football. I was about 6 years old. I was pretty average, growing up, played with a lot of my friends. I actually played soccer before I played football, so soccer was really my main focus until I was about 7th to 8th grade. And I started getting really bigger, taller, heavier, so I decided to focus on football. So I started doing that, and my first couple of years of high school was kind of rough. But then when I got adjusted to my body, started to gain confidence, started to study the game more, and once I got my confidence and I really had confidence in my ability, I started to see the results, and that's why the love of the game really took over from there.
That's awesome, man. And I know my co-host Chad, I don't think he's gotten a chance to talk yet. I've been taking over this whole interview, so I think he has a question for you, my friend.
Hey, Kendall, thank you for coming on the show. I'm definitely excited to always have players that are getting ready to start their journey in the NFL. Just some questions I think that, it's interesting for the listeners to hear is, as an offensive tackle in the NFL, in an offensive lineman in general, what's becoming very important in the NFL is your flexibility to be able to fill multiple roles, especially if you're brought in as a young player and you're starting off as depth. And just for somebody out there at tackle, how hard is it to transition from the right tackle to the left tackle or vice versa? Is that a thing that takes weeks to do, or is it something you can do fairly quickly? Or just have you had to switch right side and left side, and how would that work for you?
Actually, throughout most of my career, up until my junior year at Cincinnati, I played left tackle. I took a couple snaps at right tackle my freshman year at my Division II school, but I mostly played left tackle. And it was really an adjustment for me because I've solely played that one position my entire career. But the difference between left tackle and right tackle, it really depends on, I believe it's more mental than anything, because a lot of the players freak out from just switching their feet because they're used to pushing off of your right leg instead of your left leg. So the footwork is different. It has to be a quick adjustment, especially at the next level, and you're expected to do that. So I've had my fair share of playing left and right, but flexibility is always good to have, because all my film from my senior year is me playing right tackle, and the previous years is me playing left tackle. So teams know that I can do both. But for younger players out there, it is always good to be able to play both sides comfortably.
Quick follow-up on that. This may seem like a bit of a naive question, but does being right-handed or left-handed really go into the whole switching sides thing?
Not really, because most players are right-handed, so it doesn't make that big of a difference. But if you're right-handed and you play left tackle, you're pushing off your right leg. So most people are right-handed, right leg. So it might be easier to come out of your stance for pass protection playing on the left side. But I don't know. It's just one of those things. It varies by the person.
Sure. Another question for you, Kendall. Have you had much interaction with other University of Cincinnati players in the NFL? I know, I think it was Parker Enninger. He was drafted a year or two ago, I want to say. Have you had much interaction on what it was like for him going through that process, or do you interact with those guys very much?
I didn't really interact with Parker that much. He left actually right before I got there, but I talked to him a few times. He's a great guy. He would come and talk to some of the offensive linemen and would just inform us of the process, about how you have to literally be better than you were the day before. Like each day, that's how you stay in the league. But I also have my center from my junior year, Deshaun Bond. He was the starting center for the Indianapolis Colts, but he had an injury. And he's a really close friend of mine, and he was really a hard worker, blue-collar kind of guy. And I just talked to him the other day about it. He said just keep grinding. Like, there's always somebody that wants to be in your position. And that's the mindset he had going into camp. So it worked out for him.
Good. That's good to hear you hit. I think it's always helpful when you get those guys, because they know that that stepped up competition and how to prepare for it. One other question, so for listeners, obviously a lot of players go to the combine, but the combine basically is just a series of drills. Do you how do you interact with NFL teams? Do you have like a pro day, or how does that work for you? Do you have interviews set up with teams, or how do you interact with teams in the NFL?
We have pro day. We have a pro day set up. It's going to be near the end of March, but you can meet with teams after that or on All-Star games. I went to an All-Star game in January, and I met with quite a few teams in interviews. So.
Sure. So in terms of teams, do you obviously, I know you guys will take wherever it'll take you, but did you have a favorite team growing up in the NFL?
Chad, is that a loaded question because we're on a Dolphins show?
No, it's a general question. I didn't know if you had a favorite team, so it doesn't have to be the Dolphins at all.
It's probably to make you all mad, but I grew up a Patriots fan, actually.
Oh!
Yeah, I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it, but I had to.
Oh, well, everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Yeah, probably at your age, you've probably known nothing but Tom Brady. He's been playing for so long. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was more really of the respect I have for Tom Brady and his journey, as the last quarterback taken. If you're taking those late rounds, you're not really expected to be a premier player, so he's really counted out. I mean, I feel like I can relate to him in that way. So I just really respect his journey, his hustle, his demeanor. So that's kind of why I gravitated towards the Patriots.
Okay, I can respect that, the whole underdog angle. So with that being said, who do you model your game after in the NFL? Like if you could make an NFL comparison, who would you say you model yourself after?
I'll say Joe Staley, San Francisco 49ers.
And why is that?
He's a tall, athletic guy. He's really good in pass protection. Gets the field really well. Their offense, like the 49ers offense, can use him really well. If they have him pull, get out on corners and safeties, outside backers. He really does what it takes, whatever the team needs for them to win. They'll be down to do it. So it's pretty much like me.
So you would say that pulling is your greatest strength at tackle?
I'd say it is a strength. I mean, we didn't do it way too often. I mean, a few times I did it, it looked really good, but me, it's more of a recognizing defense, pass protecting, getting up the line, getting to the second level. So I'm really good in space. I'd say that.
Now, actually, this question literally just now came to me, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask it because it's something that is relevant to offensive linemen. Now, we know all about how some quarterbacks are like the ultimate pocket guy, like a Tom Brady, but then there are some quarterbacks like a Tyrod Taylor who like to run around. How does the quarterback's choice of gameplay affect the offensive lineman? Like when your quarterback ran, what went through your mind, and when he was sitting in the pocket, what went through your mind?
When he's sitting in the pocket, it's kind of weird, but you can always, at least playing tackle, you can feel his presence behind you. That's more of a pocket passer because you have to know where the quarterback is, even when he's directly behind you. You have to know where he is while you're blocking because you don't want to go too far upfield and let the end come back over or let him bend the corner too fast and let the quarterback be right there. But with a pocket passer, you just have to always know where he is. And when you have a dual threat quarterback that runs, you have to know when he's about to take off, and you have to be able to see with your peripheral vision once he crosses the line of scrimmage because you have to have an inside release on your man and run upfield and try to make some blocks for him so he can get as many yards as he can.
Yeah, I can tell how the game would be. It's obvious when you watch the game that that you guys have to like constantly be watching to wait and see if your quarterback's going to take off or not, and suddenly you have to change the whole game plan.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming on with us, but before we go, I want to ask you one last thing, and I think I know what the answer is going to be since you already kind of revealed yourself earlier. But are you disappointed that the Eagles won the Super Bowl?
I mean, the guys, they really deserve it, but I feel like it was a really good game played. I think that's one of the best Super Bowls been played in recent years. And the Patriots, I mean, Brady and the Patriots, the guys, they played a good game, but it all came down to, the strip sack. Tying back into the importance of offensive linemen, that really cost them the game. So, I mean, somebody had to make a play in that crucial time. So, as a Patriots fan, I mean, props go out to the Philadelphia Eagles, though, because that was a great play. It was a great game they played. So, I'll be a little upset, but
props for taking the high road, Kendall. All right, man. We really appreciate you. We really appreciate you coming on and talking with us. A lot of great insight. We really appreciate you being candid with us. So, thanks so much for coming on, and hopefully one day we'll have you on again.
Good luck to you, Kendall, with your career. Best of luck.
Thank you. All right, good luck.
All right. So that was University of Cincinnati offensive tackle Kendall Calhoun, and Chad, I think that was some pretty good insight that he gave us.
Yeah, I mean, it's good insight in general. So, you just realize that it's all about opportunity and getting the chances, which is kind of, where you were going at. How do you know how a guy stacks up unless you get those opportunities for him to get in there? And there always is a lot of those guys, and it's a good example of, he's looking to get a shot and ready to go in and work.
I wonder if he'll be disappointed if he winds up on Miami.
I wouldn't be, because right now, Jesse Davis maybe is our right tackle, and beyond that, Sam Young's a free agent again. We have no other really tackles on our team, so I would love to be on the Dolphins if I was him. He has a real good chance of making the team, so why not?
Oh, basically because he would be going against the Patriots. Yes, we're going to be picking on you for a while about that, Kendall. Sorry, we're a Dolphin show. We're kind of obligated.
No, I liked his boldness, because if I was an offensive tackle, I wouldn't want to see Von Miller at all. I would rather not go against him because he's so difficult to stop. So.
Oh, yeah. Like he likes to be challenged. I'm like, I think he likes to be punished. Von Miller is tough.
Yeah, exactly. But, if you get on the Dolphins in practice, you do get to get the opportunity to try to block Cameron Wake, and you get the opportunity to go up against Ndamukong and Suh. So that's two of the better D-tackle, D-end combinations you'll face. So you would think that in Miami we could really develop our offensive linemen by having to go against those guys in practice. So
see. We would think. I don't know what's going on. I don't know. Maybe Sam Young didn't do too bad when he got in there, and it's not like he's a superstar by any means. And Jesse Davis, of course.
I've ever since it's almost 2 or 3 years ago, Sam Young was on the Jaguars, and I remember he came in when their offensive tackle got hurt, and he handled Olivier Vernon pretty well. And he's always been a decent player at tackle. I wouldn't suggest that Miami go into next season with the plan being Sam Young's our starting right tackle, but I would absolutely love to get him back under contract to be our third tackle. I feel pretty good about him. Because if we don't, Louis, we're going to have to draft another tackle. And personally, I'm skeptical if Jesse Davis is who we want to be our right tackle, because I thought he did just fine at right guard. And I like the idea that, he can be a backup tackle for us. And so if you have Jesse Davis starting at right guard and suddenly your right tackle gets hurt, well, then you can slide him over if you need to. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I do expect either in free agency or the draft fairly high for Miami to get a tackle. They're just it's a premier position, and I think we've had enough of those years where we had like Colombo playing on the right side and our quarterback just getting murdered all year long because of it. So I'm hoping we get that position locked down.
I would hope so. And you know what? If Kendall winds up being in Miami, I will be more than happy to welcome him. He's obviously an intelligent young man. That's the thing. That's something that a lot of people don't remember, is that it takes more than just brute strength to succeed in the NFL. You've got to be smart. And just talking to Kendall, I can tell he's got that going for him.
Yeah, it's probably more difficult even than 5 to 10 years ago of what's being thrown at you, the zone blitzes you see, and you were just talking film review there about stunts and knowing how to slide over and pick guys up. That was a clear problem this year, and I suspect not to jump on him. He's had a bad enough run. But with Forrester going, the instability on our offensive line was blatantly obvious. That there was a lot of guys messing assignments up, and it just comes down to preparing it each week. And with a rookie coming in, you need a guy that's smart. You're right, Lewis. There's more to that, I think, than people realize. You can be 6'7" and 330 pounds and bench press a lot, but if you're struggling at knowing who to pick up when the defense throws different looks and blitzes at you, that's really what it comes down to.
Well, with any luck, Jeremiah Washburn will be able to whip that line into shape real quick.
I think you're going to see. One thing we haven't talked much about, but I think the Dolphins did a phenomenal job of upgrading their coaching staff, and I really like that. Of anything I've seen out of Adam Gase so far is that he doesn't play around, because you don't have the time or the luxury to do that in the NFL. And I remember in the Philbin years when, he didn't want to have Sherman go, and Sherman really was struggling. And I like the idea that the Dolphins had the most penalties. Were they number one in the NFL? I don't remember where they rated at, but they were terrible in penalties this year. And it wasn't just penalties. I saw defensive backs blowing coverage. I saw receivers in the wrong spots in their routes. I've seen multiple times offensive line missing, like two guys sliding over to pick up the same guy and letting the guy come in free. And that is all about preparation and practice and making sure that those players know how to execute. And, we mentioned, Adam Gase is basically calling the plays and being the offensive coordinator. He doesn't have the time to make sure every single position knows their responsibilities on the play calls. And so I think this was Adam Gase sending a message that, look, if you're going to be an assistant coach on this team, your unit better know what the hell they're doing or you're gone. And so I think he's upgraded multiple positions, and I'm really hoping that translates this year to us seeing the Dolphins blowing a lot less assignments and making a lot fewer mistakes because they're better prepared.
Well, that's the thing. That's actually something interesting that, yeah, you're right. Not a lot of people are talking about it, because most people that I see about every time the Dolphins make a move about the assistant coaches, all I see are a bunch of snide comments about Gase didn't do the one thing he should have done, fire himself. It's like, really? That's where you're going with this?
I'm very pro Adam Gase right now. I think he's getting the job done, and he's not playing around, and he doesn't play around during the season with players either. If you're not getting the job done, whether you don't know what you're doing or you're getting beat, you're out of there, you're gone. And that's something we've been lacking, I think, for a while with the team. We were just too hesitant, too soft to make the changes when you need to make changes. And like I said, you don't have the luxury of doing that anymore in the NFL. And so I feel like he's on the right track. At times I've been back and forth with him being so young. I do wonder if it's to his detriment to be calling plays. I know he wants to have that control, but... And
you know what, Chad? I didn't want to cut you off, but it's like a lot of coaches now seem to be wanting to do that, call their own plays.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a short-term job if you're not winning. Very, very few coaches get more than 3 or 4 years of not making the playoffs before you're fired. Unless, of course, you coach the Bengals, then I guess you can do whatever you want and you never get fired. Yes, that was a joke. Don't kill me, Bengal fans.
No, but it's true, though.
But, with that being said, I get it. That's why these coaches want to have control over personnel. They want to call their own plays, because ultimately your head rolls if you're not winning. And so, you probably would rather be in control of that. And I get it. There's so much, for those things we're talking about. Do you have time to make sure everything's, good to go for your unit if you're having to make the game plan? Because I think that has to entail a huge amount of film, watching. You have to be, which players are struggling, what are the team's weaknesses, and putting together your game plan and knowing which plays you want to utilize for which situations. That's hours and hours and hours of work that I know Gase puts in. So you worry that, is it too much? And that part of the reason why they've had, both years Adam Gase has been here, particularly the first 4 or 5 games, the team execution was terrible. They really struggled with execution. And again, to me, execution comes back to what's going on in practice and why are these players, why is it a struggle to get these players ready to go? And that was my take, is that it's a little bit overwhelmed, but maybe he's got his answer now that he's like switching all his assistants out and he's trying to hold a higher level of accountability on his assistants. But if you look through the people Adam Gase has hired, to me, I think when he got here, some of the people he wanted weren't freed up contractually, and so I think he's starting to assemble the actual staff that he prefers to have.
That's an interesting theory, but might I ask, are you okay with the fact that he stuck with Matt Burke at DC?
Yeah, here's the thing.
Here comes the unpopular opinion.
Well, no, here's an issue I have right now with defense for the Dolphins is a lot of people harp on the defense, and in my opinion, this last year more so than ever, but even the year before, but this year with Color, our offense was terrible. I mean, just awful. False starts, wrong routes, no points on the board, and I have a hard time getting really critical of the defense when your offense just keeps throwing up 3 and outs. You never give the defense the luxury of playing with a lead. And so I like to say, it's easy for a team like the Patriots defense to look good because Tom Brady's throwing up 30, 40 points a game all the time on teams. And the defense then knows that the other team has to pass. And that's just a whole different world when you're on defense, or where is the field position at? And so I feel like considering that, you can't look at just nothing but points scored in all these defensive stats, because you have to look at how often was the defense thrown on the field and what positions were they put into that they had to defend. And so that's where I am with Burke. I'm like, well, I have a hard time being too critical of Burke until the offense actually helps the defensive out a little bit more and gets the points on the board. Now, not that I thought the defense didn't have its flaws or anything like that, but I thought they did enough that Burke's justified in staying. I didn't feel like the defense was the reason this team was struggling last year. I thought it was much more heavily on the offensive shoulders.
And I would agree with that. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't be against an upgraded defensive coordinator. Like if by some crazy, cruel hand of fate comes down and Jim Schwartz got fired from Philly, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'd be all over that.
Yeah, I agree. Jim Schwartz, he'll probably get a head coaching job next. Otherwise, I don't see him. I mean, the Eagles' defense is just loaded with talent, so I doubt he's eager to go somewhere where he doesn't have all those horses.
Oh yeah, it was just a hypothetical.
But yeah, I mean, no, you're right. If a really high caliber candidate came that Gase really wanted in there, I don't have an issue with it. But I was just going off results alone that I didn't have a high concern with Matt Burke being a problem right now, or that his game planning was wrong or anything like that. So, who in there that has been great at the defensive coordinator job for the Dolphins in a long time, and it's been a long time. God, it almost feels like since Marino was here, since our team was so good offensively that the defense had that luxury of playing with leads. I can't recall very many games the Dolphins have played where they've had a solid 14-point lead, for example, on that side of the ball. So that's something a lot of people forget. A lot of people like to focus on stats, like where were you ranked in the league. But, it's hard to have a really good run defense when you're playing defense and the team can throw or pass versus when they've got to do one or the other. So, yeah,
I got you. Okay, so I want to go into some comments real quick that is in the live chat here. It's Lake McGroove. He's one of our film guys now, and he's basically saying this is actually something for both of us, Chad. I'm not sure if he's agreeing or disagreeing with both of us or one or the other. Lake McGroove, the mistake is thinking, this is back to Landry, the mistake is thinking they need to replace Landry's role if he leaves. That's wrong. They need to replace his production. That can probably be done with a decent slot receiver and a seam threat tight end.
I don't disagree with that. I don't. The Landry, my biggest problem with Landry right now is he's a very good player. And I don't like this cycle the Dolphins are in of drafting good football players, not getting them taken care of, paying money to other teams' free agents, and letting our guys walk. And I do not disagree with anybody that $14 million a year for a slot receiver is a lot. I will also respond very quickly to say there are probably going to be 5 or 6 teams line up that will immediately pay Jarvis Landry that to get him. Does that mean his production cannot be replaced? No. I mean, I think Kenyon Drake is a lot more capable than Jay Ajayi of replacing some of Jarvis Landry's production. Being honest, Miami used Jarvis Landry kind of in the role as a running back, the way they gave him the ball on such short routes. Those are essentially, are a lot of those, when you just turn and throw it to him, or it's a 1 or 2 yard pass to him, those are essentially runs that you're doing with Jarvis Landry. And so you can easily replace that with tight ends and halfback plays where those are the players getting the ball. So I don't disagree that his production, and it naturally will, if Jarvis Landry's gone and you don't have a very good slot receiver to replace him, you're going to throw the ball to the other matchup problems you get. And if we do get, we don't have one right now, keep in mind, we don't have a seam threat at tight end. If we somehow acquire one in free agency or the draft, of course, then you have another matchup that you can exploit, so you don't have to throw as many passes to your slot receiver matchup. And again, I think Kenyon Drake, I feel, is a much more talented player than Jay Ajayi. I'm not defending production, or I did like how Ajayi was a very aggressive runner, but the reality is, for a team on defense, is if you miss a tackle on Kenyon Drake, he can take it to the house because he has that speed. And so you can put plays that throw him the ball out in the flat, and the team has to respect him a little bit differently than they have to Jay Ajayi. And so I think you can replace some of Jarvis Landry's production by getting the balls into the hands of Kenyon Drake and Jakeem Grant. Those are players that can do it. So, but with that being said, I'm just expressing frustration because what I see is Juwan James going, and I see Jarvis Landry going, and I'm seeing there's another first and second round pick that we just are keeping here on a rookie contract. And when they've, been here and they've got their rookie parts developed and they're now in their prime and ready to go have the best years of their career, that's when they're not going to play for the Dolphins. They're going to go have those with somebody else. And so that's the frustrating part to me, is that we keep letting our own players move on, and we just keep getting other players that teams didn't want to keep, that usually is a recipe for 8-8, cycling. So I would rather have a slim threat tight end, Kenyon Drake and Jarvis Landry all on the field, so we had an even more potent offense. That's what I would rather have.
And yeah, I got you. Okay, so since you brought up the coaches real quick, let's just talk about the other moves that were made just recently. The addition of Ronaldo Hill. Now, obviously, Ronaldo Hill used to be a Miami Dolphin, and so was his brother Ray for a couple of years. He's 39 years old now. He played with the Dolphins from 2006 to 2008. He started 38 of the 39 games he played in, 6 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, a recovery, and 152 tackles. So this is actually a tweet this is a statement from the coach at Pitt. This is where he was coaching in college before he went to Miami. This is the statement that the coach Pat Narduzzi, I hope I said that right, Pat Narduzzi put on Twitter. Quote, Ronaldo has been a vitally important member of our staff on and off the field the past 3 years. He was so important in helping us build a strong foundation for the program, and for that I am eternally grateful. When you have great coaches who build strong relationships with players and fellow coaches, tremendous opportunities will happen for them. Coaching in the NFL has been Ronaldo's aspiration, and we are thrilled he is getting this opportunity with the Dolphins. We wish him the very best personally and professionally in his new pursuits. We will miss him, but Ronaldo will always be a Panther and always be part of our program. Unquote. So Ronaldo Hill's coming in to be the assistant DB coach. He's going to be working under Tony Oden. And like you said, Chad, you feel like Adam Gase has done an excellent job in rebuilding his coaching staff, and I'm inclined to agree. Do you think that signing Ronaldo Hill to be the assistant is going to do much? Because me personally, I think it's always good to have a former player being able to who has the ability to coach. Like, we were making jokes not that long ago that what if the Dolphins hired Sam Madison to be the DB coach? And I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, we're joking about it now, but Sam knows how to be a coach. He's coached high school, so he obviously knows a little bit of something about coaching. So making the jump to the NFL wouldn't be too hard for him because he was a very, very respected cornerback in the league. So do you think that Ronaldo Hill's going to be able to do something?
It's hard for me. I'm a armchair hack for me to judge how good a coach is. At least on a player, you can watch him on film and on the field. But to know a coach is hard to say. I am inclined to agree with you. I like a guy that's at least played that position in the league, so he has a feel for that.
If nothing else, I think he'll be able to at least do footwork and moves and stuff. It's like here's how you should do it backstep.
Yeah, I think I imagine if he's an assistant defensive coach, I would tend to think anyway his primary focus will be technique, and there probably is no other position more important right now than defensive back, because with the rules in the league and the athletes you need to have almost every snap. It'd be an interesting statistic to see how many teams are really running a nickel, or they're running 3 defensive backs on the field, because pretty much every team's always running 3 wide receivers for the most part, a lot during the game. And so, you need to have 3 solid defensive backs, and that's if nobody gets hurt. And so what that means is you're having to rely on middle-range draft picks and our young kids that need to get ready. And, this year, case in point, early on, Tony Lippett, he was gone, and that's probably who our other starting corner was going to be, with competing with Byron Maxwell. And so, Cordell Tankersley suddenly didn't get a redshirt year. He had to play quick. And so that's where a guy like Hill comes in. When you get a guy out of college that's pretty raw, is that they need to get him up to speed as quickly as possible and teach him techniques and get him ready to play in the NFL level. And I would hope that he'll be an asset to help get guys, ready from a technique standpoint, sooner rather than later. That's definitely going to be the case this year. I suspect Miami's defensive backfield is going to be young. I don't think we're going to bring in a veteran, and I don't know how Tony Lippett's doing in his recovery, but it wouldn't shock me at all if we're going to be starting a 3rd or 4th round pick on the field very quickly if we have an injury.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so here's the thing. So here's what we're going to talk about next, Chad, and it's going to be a little bit more about contracts. And I think you know where I'm going with this, because like a lot of people are really shook over the whole idea of how much money that players are getting. And I know that that's been my main issue with the whole Jarvis Landry thing, has been his potential contract. But this is where I'm having the main issue here. As we all know, and this is something that I think everybody can universally agree on, NFL contracts, especially for quarterbacks, are going through the roof. Through the roof, okay? And let me say something else. The fact that Jimmy Garoppolo is getting a 5-year, $137.5 million contract, $137.5 million, and that's going to be $74 million in guaranteed money for Jimmy Garoppolo, who halfway through the year, this year, he was still Tom Brady's backup. That is baffling to me, Chad. Baffling. And right now, if we think Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be one of the highest paid, you think that's going to be a lot of money. Right now, he's the highest paid player in the entire NFL right now. Jimmy Garoppolo is. And you know what? As soon as Kirk Cousins signs somewhere, he's going to be the highest paid player in all of football. And I would even argue that Cousins has more going for him than Garoppolo does, simply because he's played more. Garoppolo has played a total of, 6, 12, 18, 23 games. He's played 23 games in this league, starting only 7 of them. 5 of them in San Francisco. And I understand he did a great job. That's fine. I'm not trying to say he didn't. But holy moly, $137.5 million for a guy who was still technically Brady's backup and only showed a little bit in San Francisco, and already you're paying him the highest paid guy in the entire league. Chad, have we gone too far? Are we so desperate for quarterbacks that we're willing to pay anybody and anyone who shows even the slightest bit of talent?
Well, I don't know about the slightest bit of talent, but
I get it. Garoppolo did. I get it. Garoppolo did great, but it's like $137.5 million for a guy who's only been in the league for a little while.
No, I don't disagree, but you look at it and it's the have or have nots right now in the NFL. And, this was the thing that always I respond to on Twitter, because people are always say, cut this guy, get rid of Tannehill. And I'm never along the lines to say, I don't disagree. Ryan Tannehill has not been Drew Brees or Tom Brady or Ben Roethlisberger. I agree. But cutting him, what does that do? What are you going to do? How are you going to replace him? Realistically, how are you going to replace him? Because you can't just go get Aaron Rodgers. The Packers aren't going to give him up. And so the desperation for teams that don't have anything starts to set in. And so you look at San Francisco, and San Francisco has not had a quarterback, and they desperately need a quarterback. And Garoppolo he's young, he's in his prime. They started winning as soon as they put him in the game. And that was the market. And Kirk Cousins may get more because, at least for the 49ers had leverage. That's the astounding part, is the 49ers at least had the option to tag Jimmy Garoppolo and keep him under the franchise tag, which gives him a little bit of leverage in negotiating. Kirk Cousins is an all-out free agent. And so you're going to have the New York Jets, you're going to have the Cleveland Browns, you're going to have the Arizona Cardinals, all these teams that have no starting quarterback right now, maybe even the Minnesota Vikings. Those teams all need to have a starting quarterback, and Kirk Cousins is probably the best option you have right now. It's available, and he's going to get paid a bundle, because if you don't have a starting quarterback, you have no chance. That's the reality of the NFL. If you don't have a solid starting quarterback, you have no chance. And so that's why the Dolphins desperately paid Jay Cutler last year, because they were trying to still have a chance to compete for the season. Was it a bad move? Yes, but that's the desperation at the quarterback position. And what it starts to become apparent is, how different it is for these rookies, because you think of what Jimmy Garoppolo got paid. What if I took Carson Wentz right now and I made him a free agent and just let the league bid for him? He goes to the highest bidder.
Oh my God.
Because, he's a second-year quarterback. He'll be a third year, but, he looks like could be the next superstar quarterback, the way he was playing for the Eagles. And so what would the team pay for him if they'll pay what they paid for Garoppolo, or teams will pay what they'll pay for Cousins? And so, when I look at Tannehill, Tannehill would get paid pretty well, too, if you just released him, because Tannehill is a hell of a lot better than what's starting on the Jets or Cardinals or Browns right now. So those teams would pay him, too. That's just the desperation of the quarterback position. But one last thing I'm going to add with that, Lewis, is with what Jimmy Garoppolo just got paid, with the recent success of Wentz and to a degree Jared Goff, success those guys have had, and what Kirk Cousins is going to get paid, I feel very strongly that you are going to see 4 quarterbacks go in the first 10 picks in the draft, because, what other options do you have? Your options, you pay Jimmy Garoppolo or Kirk Cousins a massive deal, or you go draft a guy that might be the next Carson Wentz. I don't see how you cannot go draft those quarterbacks right now with how much they're going for in the open market, when you can get one on that lower of a contract if you draft them, because you have the rookie salary cap pool. And so, that you think about a team like the Eagles, think of the competitive advantage you have when you have Carson Wentz under a rookie contract, and the 49ers got to pay $147 million to Jimmy Garoppolo on your cap. So that's it's just crazy the way the market drives up on quarterback pricing. But yeah, I think that's the after effect you're going to see, because all these teams still need quarterbacks, and I think the offers are going to be crazy. And I don't know what to do if the Dolphins, if they do hit pick number 11 and say Josh Allen or Baker Mayfield are there at 11, a team that's desperate calls up, whether it's like the Broncos or Cardinals or whoever decide they want that pick, you may have 2 number 1s on the board offered to you for it, because teams are that desperate to get a starting quarterback. And, I don't know what you do if you're the Dolphins at that point and you have Tannehill, and you have a rookie that, if you draft him, he's going to at least set a year or two more than likely, versus getting 2 number 1 picks or whatever those offers are. And so that's going to be a very interesting pick that the Dolphins have on draft day, because, how many teams are going to be vying for that pick if one of those top quarterbacks are still on the board?
And that's something else that I have wondering too, because think about it. If you have a desperate team, like what would you get if you let's try to play armchair GM right now. If you are a team that is needing a starting quarterback and there's a quarterback at 11 and Miami's on the board, what are you offering just in terms of picks, unless you have a specific team in mind that you would like to pretend to be? How much are you going to offer to get that 11th pick? How desperate are you?
I think you have, depending on the situation, but particularly a team like the Jets or the Cardinals, if they don't get Kirk Cousins as their starter, who are you going to bring? Are you going to go sign Teddy Bridgewater or Sam Bradford, or what's your plan to try to make it back to being a playoff team?
Well, I think Bridgewater is still technically under contract in Minnesota.
Well, I'm assuming they're not. They have the option to take him, but if they don't sign him to a deal, I think he becomes a free agent. I could be wrong on that list, or Case Keenum. I'm just looking at that and saying you got to pay at Case Keenum. He's going to get paid a huge contract too. Are you going to put all the money in him? And do you feel like he's going to be the guy that leads you to the playoffs, or do you give up the draft picks and just go get the rookie? And so I think a team like the Jets don't have him, or the Cardinals don't have him. Maybe even the Bills. The Bills have been trying to get away from Tyrod Taylor for 2 years, and they have 2 number 1 picks. If they offer you that, I think you have to give it up if you're that team, because you need your franchise quarterback, and it's hard to even consider making yourselves a playoff contender if you don't have a franchise quarterback. And so I think 2 number 1 picks is easy to offer for if you're really high on, say, Baker Mayfield and he's there. 2 number 1 picks, I would be shocked at all if that offer comes in.
Okay, I'm just kind of looking real quick to see about what's going on as of the free agent market. Okay, yes, Sam Bradford is set to be a free agent, and so is Bridgewater, and so is Case Keenum. Okay, so there's at least Bradford, Keenum, and Bridgewater are all set to be undrafted, are all set to be a free agent. So that kind of waters down the market a little bit.
But let's say take the Dolphins and say you pull Tannehill out. So say Tannehill's gone, and we have nobody at quarterback. And so are you excited to give any of those 3 guys big contracts, Lewis? Are you even excited to give Kirk Cousins a $100 million contract?
Well, you know me. I don't like Kirk Cousins. I don't think he's that special, and I don't know why so many people are high on him just because he has big numbers. The only one I would be even remotely willing to give a contract to is Bridgewater. Keenum, I know, is not special, and Bradford
look at his injury, though. I mean, you're going to give him a huge pile of money, and
No, that's just it. If he's demanding a huge pile of money, then he's a little delusional, because right now he has to prove himself again.
Well, yeah, but is he delusional? He's probably going to get it. I mean, even if he's a backup quarterback, he's probably going to make $4 or $5 million a year minimum.
I'd be okay with $4 to $5 million minimum. 4 to 5? That's no big deal. That's a lot more. That's a lot less than 10, 20 something million a year.
Right. But then are you going to go into the year with his injury history, with him as your starter? That's your plan?
See, that's the issue. But again, that's kind of why I kind of laugh when people tell me that Tannehill's injury prone. It's like, it's one injury, and it's not even an injury that was considered that bad. Tannehill did not destroy his knee like Bridgewater did. He didn't need 2 years to come back and be a good guy again.
Oh, I'm with you. I am not worried about Tannehill being injury prone, but with that being said, his knee isn't as good as it was 2 years ago. He does have a higher risk of re-injuring that knee than he did before the injury. But Tannehill to me is a moot point. Tannehill's going to be the starter, and you just have to look at what Jimmy Garoppolo and what Kirk Cousins are going to get paid. And I feel it's a very strong argument to say Ryan Tannehill's just as good as those 2 quarterbacks and what they've done. Tannehill's done as well as better as those 2. And so I'm fine with Ryan Tannehill's contract and where it's at. The real question is do you get another quarterback? And that's a huge question right now at that 11th overall pick, because if that guy's on the board, that's everybody's talking about. Should the Dolphins take Baker Mayfield? I don't think I don't think he's going to make it that far because of the desperation we're talking about from other teams. I think the Jets or the Cardinals or the Broncos, one of those teams are going to go and grab those quarterbacks. And whether or not it's the Browns and the Giants, I think it will be the Browns and the Giants that take or Darnold and Rosen, you got those names right. The USC and UCLA quarterbacks are going to be 1 and 2. Whether it's the Browns and the Giants that do it, somebody's going to take them, just like Goff and Wentz went. Somebody's going to trade for them if those guys don't take them. And, look at what the Bears did last year after they just paid the money to Glennon to go get Trubisky. They gave up a boatload to move up and get him. And so it's going to be an interesting situation for the Dolphins. And I don't have I'm curious to see what you think, Liz. If you're sitting there and you're Mike Tannenbaum and Baker Mayfield's on the board and the Arizona Cardinals call up and they offer you 2 number 1 picks for your 11th round pick, or your 11th overall pick, I mean.
Well, it's actually funny because Lake McGroove in the live chat just gave me a hypothetical situation. Let me read it to you. If you are the Dolphins, do you trade 11 with a QB on the board for the Bills 21, 22, and then a 2019 second rounder?
Yeah, that's isn't that a loaded situation, because you've got your division rival, and that's a very real situation he's throwing out, by the way. You have your division rival. You've got 3 quality picks you're getting back from your division rival, and especially if you're letting Jarvis Landry and Juwan James go, the Dolphins have a pile of needs. You need an offensive tackle, running back, tight end. I mean, the list goes on of things you can fill in with salary cap friendly players. That's a very feasible trade, but Baker Mayfield becomes the next big thing. How crazy are you? So I don't have an answer. I don't know. All I can say is I'm glad I'm not Mike Tannenbaum in that situation. That's tough.
You don't have like a gut feeling? Yes, no, maybe?
Well, this
21, 22, and a 2019 second rounder.
Here is my thing. And I know there's a lot of hype right now with Baker Mayfield, but I'm just pointing out Baker Mayfield did not run a lot of pro-style offense in Oklahoma. Granted, a lot of people overlook this. He is undersized. He definitely is not Drew Brees. I mean, watching Baker Mayfield, Drew Brees is unbelievable at reading defenses, and he's unbelievably accurate. That's not Baker Mayfield. And so I'm very skeptical that you can draft Baker Mayfield, throw him out there on starting day, and win football games. I just don't think he's ready. And don't discount the fact Baker Mayfield played with a lot of NFL players. He played with NFL linemen, Joe Mixon. He played with a lot of very good football players around him.
Yeah, Lake actually mentioned that when he did the film review of Mayfield for the site.
So yeah, when I look at Baker Mayfield, I'm a little iffy on whether he definitely doesn't come off to me as somebody I'd feel comfortable starting at opening day. Now for the Dolphins, I'd feel good about drafting him knowing that he's going to back up Tannehill and throw him in there with Gase to start working at him to get him ready. But personally, I don't. I make the trade because I would rather do that with somebody maybe like Lamar Jackson and say, if I'm going to bring in a quarterback that is not somebody that's going to start on opening day, I don't know if I want to use the 11th overall pick. If I'm going to develop this guy, maybe I can get that guy in the second round. So you need a pretty strong conviction from Adam Gase if you're going to use that 11th overall pick. And so really it depends on, I suppose, if he feels like he wants to hitch his wagon to Baker Mayfield and have him be the guy. But I don't know. To me, though, you just don't see this that often, and maybe it's just because it decreases continuity. I would like to see them draft a quarterback that they can actually put on the field once in a while in some special packages. That's why somebody like Lamar Jackson intrigues me. I'd like to draft Lamar Jackson, have him be the backup quarterback, and put him out on the field about 5 plays a game that are plays designed to work with his strengths. He's so good at running the football. He's got a very strong arm. Make teams game plan knowing that Lamar Jackson's going to come in 4 or 5 times a game. And then you're getting him some game time situations. You're able to do some creative play calling with him and force teams to prepare more. I would like to see that. And I think, look, last year the Dolphins paid Matt Moore, and he wasn't the backup quarterback. If they kept Matt Moore, and there absolutely was clear the moment Ryan Tannehill got hurt that Adam Gase did not feel like Matt Moore was a starting quarterback. So if they're willing to keep a guy at number 2 that they don't feel like is a starting quarterback, why not get a rookie in there that he can start developing? So I don't think the Dolphins have a choice, in my opinion, but to draft their backup quarterback. I'll be very disappointed, honestly, if they go pay somebody like Sam Bradford or one of these type of guys, or a Josh McNown or something that's an old vet, to come in and pay that guy, $3 to $5 million a year, or whatever, just to be Tannehill's backup. Just because I feel like you're getting nowhere. I really hope they draft him. So that's where I'm at. But I guess if I had to call, and I'm at pick number 11, I probably would pass on Baker Mayfield. I know that's probably not the popular opinion, but I would probably pass on him for the draft picks.
So I was about to say it feels like you're dodging the question, Chad, but I think you finally answered it. So if you're at 11 with a QB there, and the Bills offer 21, 22, and a 2019 second rounder, you would say yes, I'll take the trade.
I think so. Unless the option C is they value somebody so much that they don't want the quarterback, but maybe they want is it Roquan Smith, the linebacker from Georgia, or Tremaine Edwards? Unless there's a player that they are so high on that they want instead of those picks, I probably would do it. Yeah, that would be my call.
I can't say that I would disagree with the choice, because that's a big haul that you're getting. Not only is it for now, but it's also for the future. Like 21 and 22, no, it's not the elite talent in the top 10 range, but these guys are still first rounders. Like Mason Foster, he didn't go until late first rounds, and he was considered one of the best rookie linebackers in football. Granted, he's in a little bit of trouble right now, but I don't know if that's going to keep holding over or anything like that. So that's a really big haul, and I would definitely take it if that meant that we could get some 2 high-quality players, because whether they're in the top of the first round or not, they're still first-round picks.
Well, right now, Louis, the Dolphins situation is we need, and that's, not knowing for sure if Landry goes, but we need 5 or 6 starters right now on our team, and we don't have very much cap space unless we create more holes by cutting people. And the draft picks give you both. They give you players with enough talent to maybe fill those starting positions in with quality players. And they also give you quality players that are playing on rookie contracts. And so that allows us for the next year or two to handle like Tannehill's contract and Sue's contract, and maybe actually put a team together. Because if you cycle around and you say, all right, well, next year, we're getting close to that range where we can get rid of Sue. I'm like, I understand getting rid of Sue, but you got to replace him. We don't have, none of our D tackles are even in the vicinity of quality as Ndamukong and Sue. And so I wanted to fill out the roster, and I don't know any better way to do it in our current salary cap situation than to get a few extra high draft picks in here to do it.
I can agree with that. So yes, I would take the trade. Because two first rounders and a second rounder for the next year, that's just too much to pass up. They can have their quarterback. I'm sure that, because here's the thing, Chad. Let's be honest about this for a second. As hyped up as so many people are on these QBs right now, I guarantee 110% that next draft comes around, there's going to be at least 3 or 4 guys that are going to be hyped up just as much.
Well, there are, but the big thing this year is demand. And, I mean, there's, I guess you want to call it hidden demand, but the New England Patriots are an example right now. The New England Patriots need a quarterback. Tom Brady is 40, and I can't imagine that they're thinking of Brian Hoyer as being the next quarterback.
Wouldn't that be funny?
Well, I don't think – I mean, granted, they may decide they're just going to go through another year with Brady and Hoyer, but I'm just saying an example, the teams out there, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Roethlisberger's been the last couple of years talking about, maybe retiring. And so there's these other teams out there that want quarterbacks too that would be more than happy to spend a first or second round pick on them as well. And so I think the demand is so high this year right now for teams that desperately need quarterbacks, either as the heir apparent or as even the starters, that the demand's going to be pushed so high. But I'm kind of in agreement with you, Lewis. I don't know. Of the quarterbacks this year, I think there's a lot of hype around them, but is there really a prospect right now, a quarterback that's that good? There isn't an Andrew Luck.
Lamar Jackson.
And he's not even being rated in the top 4 for most draft boards. He's the 5th or 6th quarterback right now, coming off the board. And I don't know. I mean, I really do. I really expect that there's going to be 4 of them go in the first 10 picks, and I think there might be 5 or 6 quarterbacks to go in the first round.
And I'm sure that next year that's going to happen all over again, Chad. Because that's the thing that bugs me is that why are you so gung-ho about right now? It's not like any of these guys are generational talent. Carson Wentz was a generational talent. Jared Goff was supposed to be a generational talent. Jameis Winston was supposed to be a generational talent. And then we got Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. These are all generational talents. There's always one generational talent. Maybe that's their idea of a generation is 1 year at a time. Every year is a generation.
Well, there's no position that's harder to evaluate because Carson Wentz played. What was it, North Dakota? I'm trying to remember where he played, but it wasn't a big school, and he panned out really well. And so it's just hard.
He panned out really well. That's the thing. He panned out really well in year 2. In year 1, there were people questioning whether they wasted a draft pick on Carson Wentz.
Well, he was playing decent. I mean, he wasn't like lighting the league up, but he was able to play. That's the big thing.
Decent. That's the problem.
That's really the best you can hope for, in my opinion, if you're drafting a rookie quarterback and you're going to start him on day 1. The Dan Marinos of the world that as rookies are really good that's so rare. And so that's your situation, but you don't have a choice because it doesn't take much evaluation to realize the reason these teams make the playoffs consistently are the ones that have good quarterbacks. It doesn't mean you can't make the playoffs without having the top 2 or 3 quarterback, but it's the teams that have the top quarterbacks that consistently make the playoffs. Peyton Manning's team has always made the playoffs. Tom Brady's teams always make the playoffs. Drew Brees' teams typically make the playoffs. Ben Roethlisberger's teams make the playoffs, and it's because those teams get that good franchise quarterbacks, and it really is the haves and have-nots. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. Those guys you are not going to get Aaron Rodgers as a free agent, at least for another 8 or 9 years. The Packers are not going to let him go. And your only option to try to get one of those guys is through the draft. And, I think you've said this, Lewis. I agree with you. I think you just keep getting quarterbacks every year or every 2 or 3 years. Use a high pick on a quarterback until you get that guy. That's how I feel, and I know it's hard to do that when you have all the needs. But I know on one side I'm saying I would trade that 11th round pick for the draft picks, but I still would absolutely take a quarterback at the end of the 1st or in the 2nd round if I'm the Dolphins versus bringing in a veteran free agent. Yeah,
there are teams that can afford to do this. The Eagles can afford to do this. They just won a Super Bowl. If they want to look for an upgrade for Carson Wentz, I don't think they'll find one, but if they wanted to, they could afford to use a draft pick on that. The Jaguars definitely can afford to do that because obviously it won't be hard to upgrade from Blake Bortles, but they have enough talent all over the place that they can afford to find a quarterback like that. Then you have guys like, I don't know, let's see. Who else is super generational upgrade quarterback teams? Minnesota Vikings, they have a lot of talent. They can afford to draft a quarterback and see what happens.
Well, the Vikings technically don't have a quarbradford unless they're going to franchise one, which I doubt.
Right, they have their choice of 3 guys: Sam Bradford, Teddy Bridgewater, and Case Keenum.
To clarify though, Lewis, they have the option to franchise tag one of those guys.
Well, they can also re-sign them back
if the player has to agree to it. That's the same as them being free agents. My point is the Vikings, as of today, the Vikings need starting quarterback for next year. Whether it's going to be pay one of those guys a sizable contract, or you go draft one. And those are the teams I'm just saying kind of watch out for, because typically in the draft, that's how it's went, is teams that move up and make those moves that you don't always see them coming. And it wouldn't shock me at all if a team made a move and jumped up like the Patriots. The Patriots have some ammunition. It wouldn't shock me at all if they suddenly jump up and grab a quarterback because they have the luxury of doing it. So I don't know, right now. So I think, though, there are teams right now that are absolutely desperate are the Jets and the Cardinals, because they have nobody. Because I don't know who the starting quarterback even is for the Cardinals right now. Is it like Drew Stanton or something like that? I don't even know. And I can't imagine the Jets are seriously going to have Bryce Petty and and Hackenberg be their two quarterbacks this year going into the season. And so those teams, I don't see how they have a choice but to do whatever they need to do to get up and get one of those top guys.
All right. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's hard to figure out, but I think we've exhausted the conversation for this week. We'll talk about it more next week. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you again so much for joining us. I do want to try and do some live Twitter talks just for everybody, because that was the one thing that I was trying to do, but we couldn't pull it off because something came up a couple days ago. And I do want to get back to doing that. Now, tomorrow I'm going to be at the Dolphins Cancer Challenge, so I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to a lot of guys. I want to ask some of the former players what they thought about what happened this year. Like, for instance, I really want to bring Channing back on the show because I want to talk to him about linebackers, because something went very wrong there. And I know he and I have talked, just him and me, just talking, chewing the fat for a little bit about linebackers and stuff. And he wasn't trashing Kiko, which a lot of people are doing now. So I want to know what his thoughts are now, especially with everything that's happened. So I want to see if I can get Channing back on the show. I'm going to get some other guys that I've talked to for a while back on the show, because I want to talk about a lot of these things. So we're going to see what happens in the future. Of course, next week, I believe we're going to have Devin Butler for he's a third prospect that we have coming on to talk with us. And he's a cornerback or a defensive back. I'm not sure. I have to look it up, see if he's played corner or safety. I have to check. But we want to thank again Kendall Calhoun for coming on and talking with us. You are a very intelligent young man just talking to you, I can tell. So thank you so much for coming on and giving us your insight. We'd hope to see you in the NFL and having a good, bright future. Hopefully in Miami. I'm not going to be biased. Well, maybe a little biased. Okay, I'm a little biased. It's a Dolphins podcast. But anyway, thank you all so much for joining us. And we will see you all next week, where hopefully my co-host Chad Ronnebaum and I will have more things to talk about. And I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of topics to talk about. So from all of us here, good night.